about yourself and the journey that led you to starting Postpilot?
So I've been in ecom for 25 years, mostly on the brand side. So I started my own brand, sold that in 2013 to private equity, and then started as a private equity operating partner. And that's when I met my co-founder and business partner, Drew. And we were essentially running a bunch of private equity backed turnarounds. So typical profile was 9-figure brand losing 8 figures. And we had to essentially get them profitable again and then sell them. And direct mail was one of the tools in our tool belt that worked consistently. And it was an easy win for some of these big turnarounds, because you'd go into these businesses that have millions of customers in their customer file, but less than 10% of them were active and engaging even with email campaigns. And so it was like, how do we get back in front of these customers? It's your best, richest audience. It's people who have already bought from you, but they were inactive. So we used direct mail, but it was the stereotypical clunky, tedious experience of a bunch of spreadsheets and then finding a printer and then making creative and then batch and blasting to a bunch of people and then waiting months for more spreadsheets to try and figure out what the ROI was. And essentially the thesis was direct mail works and it's just been hard to use. Somebody needs to build Klaviyo for direct mail, something that really the digitally native marketer understands. And that's essentially what we did with Postpilot. We started out as really more of a retention platform, and now over the years have really become a full funnel growth channel.
Yeah, and that's interesting to see that evolution into prospecting as well. I know, from a paid media side, because as an agency, we mainly focus on paid media and creative with that. CPMs keep rising year over year. So companies prioritizing retention through things like CRO, email marketing, and direct mail as well is just becoming ever more important. I think, not an absolute with this statement, but the industry with D2C kind of shifted towards the online, Facebook ads, Google ads that way. And I know there was a webinar series that you all ran in 2023 that had a tagline, at least on one of the graphics that I saw, that said, meet your favorite old, and then in brackets, new marketing channel. Kind of give me your thoughts on that. I mean, I don't want to call it a resurgence of direct mail, but what do you think is causing a lot of major brands to shift back focus towards offline marketing?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that was sort of part of the thesis as well, is digital is going to become more competitive, more saturated, and more expensive over time as more budgets shift into it. Whereas the mailbox is actually has become less competitive. Obviously, your email inbox is overflowing, and your mailbox, people are only getting a handful of mail pieces a day, and it becomes more attractive on a cost basis over time. Because while CPMs are rising, I think the stat was like 19% last year, the price of postage is relatively fixed. Maybe it goes up a couple cents a year. And so it used to be, obviously, in the good old days of Facebook, you could buy clicks for a nickel, and you just put in $1, you get $5 back. Those days are pretty long gone. But now mail has become more attractive because of the fixed cost nature, and on a relative basis, it's less than the cost of a click now.
Interesting aspect you talked on the fixed cost there. I know we said earlier that Postpilot has kind of evolved from being retention first to now you're doing prospecting as well, so full funnel opportunity that way. And I saw a recent announcement with Acquisition AI, a new technology that Postpilot has released. And in the statement that I saw online, you mentioned that you say it's like Meta for mail, except the costs are consistent and predictable that way. Could you just share with me a little bit about Acquisition AI and what's behind that tech and how it's helping out brands?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something we've been working on for years.
Really?
Essentially, we have billions of data points on hundreds of millions of US consumers. We've aggregated this data from a large number of sources over time into our own data warehouse. Everything from demographic attributes like how old they are, their household income, where they live, all of those kinds of things, to psychographic information. We know things like you're an expectant mother in your 3rd trimester. We know that you're an outdoor enthusiast who shops 3 times a month at Target for healthy snacks. We know all of that stuff about so many consumers, And we work with thousands of brands too. So we have all of this data that we can use to help train our AI. And we've combined all of that into our own data warehouse and essentially said, we can now use our AI to build lookalike audiences in the same way, essentially, that Meta builds lookalike audiences, looking across these thousands of attributes for what we know about all of these potential customers that look like your best customers and are more likely to be in market at a given time. So essentially, you can run prospecting campaigns similar to Meta prospecting campaigns. We can test different models, test different creative, similar to how you'd execute a Meta campaign, and continuously optimize performance around what we see working best. So again, it should feel very familiar to a digital marketer, and you see all the results in a real-time dashboard, just like a Meta dashboard.
Yeah, and you said focus on things that are working best. And I realize there's no absolutes across industries, brands, et cetera. But with prospecting, is there any type of actual physical layout of direct mail? So like a specific pamphlet with catalog or any sort of creative that's generally working for prospecting?
Yeah, I think some of the most important attributes are the business itself. So things like higher AOV, higher LTV, having a really distinct customer are all things that are important to have success with direct mail, particularly on the prospecting side. So for example, you're selling a really generic product, that has no distinct audience. It's $25. That's hard to crack on Meta.
Mm-hmm.
Direct mail is also that's not gonna be the right solution for you. But I mentioned an example earlier of a baby brand who was targeting expectant mothers in their third trimester as one of the key attributes. We know that is their consumer. We have that information. That's a really distinct audience. High AOV, high LTV, because once they get that customer, they're selling them more clothes and accessories over time. That worked really, really well. I think they were getting 4+X, which is extraordinarily good for prospecting, particularly with direct mail.
Yeah.
So that's really important, the sort of characteristics of the business. If we don't think it's a good fit, we're going to be super transparent with you. We really don't want brands that we don't have a good level of conviction are going to be successful with this to venture into prospecting and have poor results. We just don't want that for brands. But if you're a good fit, we'll tell you. And then to your point, we help develop the creative that we think is going to work best. Typically, that's a larger format for prospecting. So a larger card, one of our catalogs, which is like an oversized trifold, or even one of our mini catalogs. Because with prospecting, you want to be able to show more assortment of your product. You want to be able to educate and inspire people about your brand. Whereas with retention, you can easily get away with our 4x6 postcard, because really all they need is a nudge at that point. They're familiar with your brand. That works fine. It's the lowest cost option. So we recommend that.
No, and that's good. And so prospecting is a great opportunity. We still have full funnel of retargeting, and there's some things with retention that you were mentioning as well. With retargeting, you all have site match, mail match, and cart match as well, which based on the names, I'm imagining is based on some sort of pixel implementation to be able to pull audiences for touch points pre-purchase. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, exactly. So with mail match, we're matching email addresses to a postal address. So typically, for the folks that are opting into your email list, say they go through your entire email welcome sequence. They don't convert by the end of your welcome sequence. Trigger a card then before you risk losing them and losing their engagement. Try and get them off the fence and get them to buy. With site match, that's where we're dropping the pixel on your site and identifying anonymous browsers of your site. It's a really good strategy to test even before you go into cold acquisition, because this is still new customer acquisition, but it's a warmer audience. It's at least people we know have engaged in some way with your brand, have shown some degree of intent. Great opportunity to get a baseline on acquisition before you move into cold prospecting. And again, we target those folks with a card. And cart match is similar. So people who are browsing the site and abandoning your cart, we can trigger a card to those people, even if they haven't given you their full postal address.
And is this the phase where people would generally focus on discounts, or is there any kind of general best practices here, even though, it's different for every brand?
Yeah, great question. We get this a lot. So we recommend that the incentive be aligned with your brand. So some brands are hardcore no discounting. Jones Road Beauty doesn't discount, but they did a free gift with purchase, and that crushed, not just with direct mail. They did that across a bunch of channels around the holidays, and it crushed. Other brands, if they're used to sending a 20% off offer, if that's what's showing up on the website, that's what's showing up in your email flows, you should be consistent with that. Don't don't offer 20% everywhere and then don't offer it in direct mail. But conversely, we don't say, oh, you're offering 20% on your website, you got to go 30 or 40% on direct mail. We want to maximize your margin. We want to use incentives to create that sense of urgency. So a best practice is to use some sort of incentive that creates urgency, whether it's on retention or prospecting.
No, that makes sense. And moving down the funnel to retention and reactivation, I know that you've brought that up briefly when we were talking about prospecting, different strategies there. You've said the goal with Postpilot was to, not the goal, but a mindset with Postpilot was to make a Klaviyo for direct mail. And I understand with retention and reactivation, there's similar, I don't call them campaign flows because you're not necessarily doing a flow with direct mail, but win backs, VIPs, holiday seasonal, post purchase, things like that. All of those are opportunities with direct mail as well.
Yeah, and we actually can do flows.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
think about you can create segments the same way you create segments in Klaviyo or your ESP, and then you can send a one-off campaign to that segment. Think, your email campaigns around a sale announcement like Black Friday or a new product launch. But then you can also create triggered flows, just like you're doing with an email flow. Literally, as every individual customer enters that segment, just like in an email, instead of firing off an email, we are firing off an individually personalized card in real time to that person. We're doing it
Hmm.
millions of times a day, where customers enter, meet the criteria that our brands have set. They bought a 60-day supply of supplements. They haven't come back by day 62. On day 62, trigger a card that says, Colby, it's time for a refill. Come on back. We'll take 10% off. And it fires off that card to you in real time. So yeah, these are actually happening as triggered flows in addition to the campaigns that you run around sort of tent pole events.
Interesting. And I know attribution could be a whole separate conversation, so we won't necessarily go deep into that hole there. But just a question for you. I mean, what are the general points of attribution? I imagine QR codes are one, but what are the general ways that people attribute sales to direct mail?
Yeah, the great thing about direct mail is you get clear one-to-one attribution because we can track it at the household level. We're natively integrated with your Shopify store, and we know that a person at this household got a card on this date, and a person at that household went on to make a purchase 3 days later, or 7 days later, 20 days later, and we show that to you in a real-time dashboard. And so you don't actually need to use QR scans or coupon codes to measure redemption because we know that household purchased. And people will say, well, what if they got, an email campaign or a Facebook ad? Well, we can run holdouts directly in the app as well. So we can show the incremental lift from those cards as well, which is a better way of measuring than using coupon codes, because we have insane amounts of data on this that show a lot of people don't use the coupon code on the card. They either forget, they don't care, or they find a different one on the website when they get there and they use that instead. So it is a data point that we track and show you, but the better way to measure it is on a household level, and we can show you the incremental lift as well.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And you were kind of briefly talking about this just now, but direct mail fitting into the omnichannel strategy. How do you frame it when you're talking to somebody if they're looking to add in direct mail about how it fits into their overall omnichannel approach?
Yeah, good question. So obviously, we're not suggesting you don't use Meta or you don't use email, but it really is a supplemental channel for brands that are looking to reach a much higher percentage of their customers. So I encourage brands to do this, now. Go to Klaviyo, build out a segment of everyone that's bought from you in the last couple of years, and then build another segment of everyone that's bought from you and has opened or clicked an email in the last 60 days. you probably are reaching less than 20% of your customers. That means you got so much on the table that is an easy win to go out and reactivate, re-engage with using direct mail. And then on the acquisition side, again, it's another touch point that allows you to reach prospects that you may or may not be reaching in Meta. We also know that it takes multiple touch points for brands, for a customer to convert. So ultimately, you're getting incremental acquisition, incremental revenue by adding direct mail to that mix. And we know that brands, reach a point of diminishing returns with Meta as well. So obviously, once you start getting to some degree of scale, the next dollar that you invest into the channel isn't returning, as much as the last dollar did. You need to find ways to diversify your spend at a higher level of return and to de-risk your business. We all see what goes on with Meta on pretty much a weekly basis,
Daily basis sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. From, I can't get into my account to like what's going on with the algorithm today. You really need to build a resilient business. We're not saying replace Meta, but you really need to find other channels that help diversify your marketing mix. And you can count on to deliver significant revenue at a predictable cost.
And it sounds like Postpilot is really at the front of direct mail with innovation. We talked about acquisition AI, which is exciting to be able to do prospecting with direct mail. Any future trends or insights you see happening in the next 2 to 3 to 5 years for direct mail?
Yeah, we do think it's just going to continue to become more attractive over time. We have the most powerful, sort of robust data set that really has ever been created for direct mail, and that's only getting stronger over time, which means we expect performance to continue to improve, particularly because the cost is relatively fixed. So as performance continues to improve, your ROI will go up because the cost, that denominator isn't really changing. So that's a big focus for us. And that's where we've just been investing a lot of time and money for a while, and we'll continue to invest. And we've introduced other formats as well. So we introduced the catalog, which you mentioned earlier. Historically, catalogs have been very difficult to execute because they take 4 to 6 months. You have to run hundreds of thousands at a time. We've made it easier to get into catalogs. And we introduced our shared catalog. If you're familiar with like the typical Valpak style envelopes that you get in the mail with a bunch of cards like inside, we don't love that format. Typically, the targeting is really broad. It's like females in this geography. You're smashed in between, a mobile phone carrier, a wireless carrier and a credit card and an Instacart. So we created our own shared mailer, which is more of the magazine editor pick style format with curated brands around a really targeted persona. That's another great tool to start testing into acquisition, but at a lower cost because you're sharing space across multiple brands. And therefore, everybody pay, it's like 10 cents to get into that. And you're still able to target a very precise persona there. So these are the kinds of things that we're always thinking about. How do we deliver profitable returns to brands and help them scale up this channel?
No, I love that. And I mean, it sounds like, as I said, Postpilot's really at the forefront with this. I have talked with, I guess sales reps is the best term for Postpilot many times through partnership program, and can attest to what you said earlier, which I really like, of them telling you honestly if a brand's not a good fit or not. That's rare in the marketing world, in the marketing agency world. And it saves a lot of face for our clients if somebody's not a good fit and then they go into it that way. What final advice would you have for somebody that's looking at getting started with direct mail?
Well, we're right at the cusp of Black Friday, so it's a great opportunity, and there's still a little bit of time left if you want to test into it. It's a great way to ensure that message, your important message around your Black Friday offer, gets in front of the maximum number of people, cuts through sort of the digital clutter. We know that CPMs and email inboxes are going to go crazy over the next few weeks. The election on top of it certainly isn't helping with that. And so great opportunity to start testing into the channel. And we do recommend testing lower in the funnel and working your way up. So that's sort of the contrarian view as to how people have tried to push direct mail in the past, where it's like spray and pray on acquisition and invest a ton of money. We really say, let's get the easy wins, build a program out that we think is going to be profitable for you. To your point earlier, we really have, it's really built into our philosophy here of wanting to make sure that brands are doing things that we think are going to be successful, so we can help identify what we think those opportunities are and then build the program out from there.
I love it. I mean, growing up, I would always get the CSS catalog and, LL Bean and stuff like that, catalogs, direct mail, definitely a great opportunity. How can listeners learn more about Postpilot, the opportunities or offers that you have? Because I know they're frequent, and how can they connect with you?
Sure. Postpilot.com. And you can email me directly, Michael at Postpilot. Connect with me on Twitter and LinkedIn. That's where I'm generally most active. And happy to answer any questions. Again, let you know my thoughts around what strategies I think are going to work best for you. And yeah, that's
Michael,
probably the easiest way.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking through direct mail with us today.
Yeah, Colby, thanks so much for having me.